extremely excited about this specific webinar because this one hits really home for me and where I've lived in the finance world for over 35 years. Yes, over 35 years, actually. It's been a long time. Let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Tammy Bunting. Currently, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Martis Solutions. It's a budgeting tool, and I actually was introduced to Martis in 2010 when I was the Director of Finance at Fellowship Church in Grapevine, Texas, and I had about 500 program leaders that I was budgeting in Excel, and I was just devastated. I could not keep up. So met Bill Cox, who's the founder, and we have been friends ever since. So when I retired from being a CFO of many churches over the last several years, he invited me to help grow his business. So that's why I'm here at Martis at this point. Let me tell you a little bit about Martis, then we're going to get an opportunity to learn a lot about Mortarstone. I've been a customer. You never know, maybe I could be an employee someday because I'm a raving fan of Mortarstone. Love what it does in regards to the analytics. I'm going to share a little bit about that in the next slide, but first of all, just a little bit about Martis and the fact that we're a budgeting and reporting tool founded in 2008. We have over 470 plus customers. We were built first with the church market in mind. It was built for churches and then expanded into the nonprofits. We've really expanded with the nonprofits during the pandemics with those that, have grants, and there's been a lot of budgeting challenges. We're built in the cloud, an original cloud-based product. We have seamless integrations with all the different financial softwares that are out there. The best part about it is you're up and running in 2 weeks, and that is the honest to goodness truth. We can configure it. What is really great for churches that you can configure user access by function, by dimension, by location, so you can restrict those users to only see what they need. And in that collaborative budgeting, which is our hallmark at Martis, that's so important to be able to push those budgets out to those users that need it the most to be able to make their own assumptions. We have monthly updates. We also have excellent US-based support. So that's just a really high flyby. But why we're here today and what has been a hot topic for me is that, in fact, at TCN, I spoke on the contribution conundrum. And the contribution conundrum for someone like me who's lived in a CFO seat, who has had to present why we're budgeting, what we're budgeting and giving. Why? And then when I budget that, not having any intelligence to actually say why, when I get asked the hard question, why is giving down? Prior to something like Mortarstone, there was nothing for us. We had no way of being able to determine what were the things that were happening. A lot of times the senior pastors would, when we budgeted, they would actually set what the whole contribution was going to be just based by, it was more like intuition. We're going to raise this 9%. And then I had to back everything into it and then never have any justification for why. You've got your typical average gift per attendee, but that's changing. The demographics of givers is changing. It's not based on attendance, it's based on impacts. So I am really excited about talking about using intelligence data for analytics to be able to steward our budget, to make those information-based assumptions. I definitely want to replace intuition, like what I think may or may not happen this year, with hard evidence on our donors and their giving habits. And that's where Mortarstone comes in and gives you all of that data. I want to take it one step further, and I want to be able to use that data and budget against it and actually do actuals to budget. So in Martis, we can use stats. We can use the Mortarstone stats and actually say, we're going to budget a increase or a decrease in number of large donors. We're going to see band movement between these 4 or 5 bands, some bands. Based on our trends, we can predict that this is what could happen. We build those assumptions that gives me my total contributions. And now I can see why we are not hitting that mark, combining a budgeting tool with a mortar stone solution that has all of that analytics. I want to be able to use, the data that's accurate, not assumptions, not I thought, or we thought this was going to happen based on something, versus this is what's actually been happening to our donors, to the giving over the last few years. We can predict, and if we don't meet that mark, then maybe as what will be shown by Megan is, what can we do to encourage generosity and actually have the right conversation. So without further ado, I want to introduce Megan Brown, and Megan comes to us with tons of experience. She is currently the senior generosity strategist for Mortarstone. She has over 7 years as being as pastor of stewardship to a 10,000 plus member church. So she comes with a lot of knowledge and a lot of expertise, and I'm really excited to be able to be here to listen to some of that advice and direction that we'll get from her today. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then if you want to take it from here, Megan, we're ready to go.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for your time this afternoon. And thank you so much, Tammy, for allowing Mortarstone to come and be a part of what Martis is doing. And we are just, I loved hearing what you had to say about how you can take what's going on over here with the analytics and actually make some real assumptions, saying this is really what could be going on, and here's what we can do with the data. And so today I also hope to bring to you guys the opportunity to even hear some strategies that you can apply with the data so that you can see those numbers and you can begin to take a next step. So thank you for letting us be here. Everybody who's here on the call or joining us by watching this at a later time, just welcome. So honored to be with you. If I were in person with you, I would love to be able to look in your eyes and let you know that I am just so grateful to have met you on this side of heaven, because that to me is what numbers are all about. When we're looking at this information, numbers tell a story. And God wrote a whole book in the Bible on numbers. So I think it's fitting. They tell a story, but attached to every single story is the life of a person. And our lives are what matter. And so while we're looking at the numbers and we're analyzing the data and we're backing into budgets so that we can do more ministry, it's because of the people who are attached to those numbers. And so that's really my heartbeat. I've been doing this with Mortarstone for 5 years, and I was a customer of Mortarstone prior to that when I was a stewardship pastor for 7 years. And prior to that, I did financial planning. So I have done something financial my whole life, with the big goal of saying, Lord, I want everything that we do on this side of heaven to count, because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I think that you all, because you're in nonprofits and you're in the space of the church, that you have that view of being able to say, absolutely, we want our work on this side of heaven to count. So I'm going to start to share my screen and put up the PowerPoint presentation. And we have a chat feature down in the bottom or on the right or wherever your controls are at. And I would love for you all to be able to use that chat feature. So make sure we've got people who are manning that. And if you have questions as we're going along in this presentation, throw them in the chat section, and we want to make sure your questions are answered. And if we don't have an answer, we will do our absolute best to try to get you the answer that you need. So as we start this out, as we're kind of thinking about stewarding your budget through the end of 2022 and stewarding your budget to be highly successful, Lord willing, in 2023, we want you to really think about 3 key components that you can use when you're analyzing your data. Number 1, you need to analyze a few different things. So when you're accessing your data, if you're using Mortarstone, or even if you're not using Mortarstone, you still need to think about analyzing your data through this lens. What is going on with our givers, and what is going on with the giving that they're doing? Those are the 2 big buckets that we're looking at. What's going on with the people, and what's going on with the dollars that are attached to the people. And then we take it a step further and we analyze those people in subsegments. We say, what's going on with all of our giving, with all of our contributions, our total giving to the general fund? What's going on with that? And then, in amongst all of those givers, there are some things that we even drill further down to. What's going on with our brand new givers? What's going on with our core group of givers, the people who are probably the lifeblood of what's going on in your church or your nonprofit organization? And then, third, what's going on with our top givers? And then we want to take a look at those in different slices. How are we acquiring those givers? How are we retaining those givers? And how are we growing those givers? So, when we are looking at analyzing our data through that lens of giving and givers, we have all those different things that we want to be able to measure and put some tools around. Once you've measured them, the key then is to do something with them, to build a strategy, to build a discipleship strategy, a communication strategy, an education strategy, to be able to reach the people who are attached to those numbers and help grow them from a faith raising standpoint and not just a fundraising standpoint. And then the very last thing that we'd like you to be able to do by using software is to manage to that. Inspect what you expect. Set a goal for the things that you are wanting to grow in, and then work towards it and manage accordingly by being able to use the software to look and say, have we started to meet our goal? Are we making progress in this area? And all of these things sound very easy in theory, and they're not too difficult. But the most important thing that you can remember is that you have the opportunity of a lifetime to do something today with this information. And I have a good mentor who always told me, take advantage of the opportunity of a lifetime during the lifetime of the opportunity. So that means we want to take this information and apply it and use it. I hope that you'll find that this webinar is something that you'll be able to say, I'm going to take this back. I'm going to look at analyzing my data. I'm going to look at the different strategies that I need. And then I'm going to start managing to this through the end of the year and in 2023. With that stage being set, let's dive in and begin to say, well, where would we start if we're analyzing our data? What is it that we need to be looking at when it comes to what's going on with our giving and our givers? So up here on the screen, we're going to look at one example and another one that are completely the same. And we're going to look at 3 whole years worth of month by month data and say, this is a really good starting point. When we're looking at data and we're trying to figure out where we're going, we have to first look back to see where we've been in order to know where we need to go and grow. We have to be able to look back and say, have we done all that we could, and where did we do well at, and where are the holes that we're missing or the gaps that we need to fill? Then we also have to look at the data and say, where are the opportunities that we have and the current trends that we see? And then the third thing that we need to do is say, how do we set this goal for the future here? So when we're looking at these 3 complete years of data that we all have magically lived through, right? This has been some of the most unprecedented times that I can ever imagine in my 40 plus years of life of living. I never have seen times like these before. While there's nothing new under the sun, this is new to us, and we've never seen years quite like 2019, 2020, 2021, and then currently where we're at in 2022. If you'll remember back with me, if we can think backwards, 2019 was a really good year. Things were trucking along, and then everything halted in 2020, and then the wheels started turning again in 2021. So when it comes to data and looking at these subsets of it, you can see by looking at yours, which is step number 1 for you, analyze 3 full years of your contribution data month over month over month, and say, did we grow from 2019 to 2020? Did we grow from 2020 to 2021? Were we growing? When we're looking back at the ticker tape of the tail, what were the things that we did well? This particular set of data right here that you can see, this group at the contributions on the bottom, it went from 3 million all the way to 4.2 million. So this is a church that's been growing. So we have to ask questions then. Where did the growth come from? Did the growth, especially in the years that we've been in, was the growth because they acquired new campuses? Was the growth because there was some sort of anomaly and a giver gave an inheritance or a massive gift? Was there a capital campaign that took place in the midst of this, or an all-in campaign, or a one fund campaign that took place that grew the church by this enormous amount, almost 42% over this period of time of growth? What were those things? And is that normal? Is that something that we can predict again? So those are the first relevant things that you need to do when looking back at a 3-year history, is to say, did we grow year over year? And is that year over year growth sustainable? Can we continue to think that we're going to grow at almost a 17% year over year year over year pace? Or from 2020 to 2021, it's closer to about 25% growth there. Where did that come from? And if there's some anomalies, then throw them out and rerun the numbers. Take a look at the individual months and say, from looking at this, and we know this as nonprofits and churches, a huge amount of our giving came in at year end. So do we have a solid year end strategy this year to go ahead and pull in those same dollar amounts? Are we pulling out all the stops? Are we not only talking to people about giving from cash, but are we also talking about giving to people at year end through non-cash assets as well? Do we have a way to be able to help our givers give from their balance sheet and not just their income statement? And have we put a solid plan in place to make that year end trend that we see year over year over year as successful as we're coming to the end of 2022? If you haven't started your 2022 year end strategy, today is the day to start to begin to think about that. And I'll give you some tools here to think that through as we go through the presentation. But I wanted to also just point out, because this is a church that looks like they've either acquired a campus or they had some extremely large inheritance gifts that came in. So they grew over this time period. But I also wanted to show you a church that did not have as much growth, that kind of really is relatively flat or underperforming when it comes to inflation. So when you're looking at this subset of data, it's the same thought process, the same questions that we're asking ourselves, but at the very end of the day, year over year, from 2019 to 2020, when things were somewhat solid, they grew. They grew at a 6% growth rate approximately, but then they shrunk in 2021. And so it ends up that they are kind of just washing and being even from a few years ago to today. If you're looking at that pace of inflation, you're not even keeping up with it. So can this church budget with a growth factor if they don't change something? To the point that Tammy was saying, we have to use real data and analysis to be able to say, we can't just use intuition and hope that we grow at a 9% growth rate. Rather, we have to say, can we set that goal? Is it realistic and achievable? And what does our history say about that? And then you can look at the months and plug in where you might need some strategies to be able to grow in those areas. You might need a heavy year-end strategy, but perhaps you need to do something around Easter this year too. Or maybe you need to do something over the summer that's going to change your difference in your overall makeup of your annual contributions. These are the ways that you're going to begin to start with analyzing your data. And this is where I would recommend that you begin. Look at a longer ticker tape. Look at the past 3 years and look at the different trends of what you can find gaps in or holes in, or where you can find the opportunities for growth and the things that are solid that you need to keep doing. So start there. If you're using your Mortarstone account, you can dive in easily. This is depicted for you. You could even look at a longer tail of the tape if you wanted to. You could look at 5 years of history, but this is a good place to begin. And if you're going to go to all of that trouble and you're going to start asking those questions, you better believe that more questions are going to come to follow. So this is where we say we start with all giving and we look at the 3-year history, and then we dive into where we're at today. And we say, okay, now that we've got a good idea of some gaps that need to be filled and some opportunities that we have, we also know some of the things that we need to continue when it comes to giving. Let's dive in and look at all of our givers and the ways in which they're giving from a financial standpoint. So when you're looking at this is what's called banded giving. And Mortarstone led the way in banded giving. We said, let's take all your givers and let's put them into groupings based on the dollar amounts that people are giving or households are giving to your church or to your nonprofit organization. So for your benefit and the benefit of looking at this particular graph, you can see that band 1 through 5 on the left-hand side of your screen are where I'm going to give you some numbers for. Band 1 in this example, and in all examples when you're using Mortarstone, unless you choose to change the criteria, band 1 is anybody who gives from a penny to $200. Band 2 are anybody who gives from $200 to $1,000. Band 3 are the households that give from $1,000 to $5,000. Band 4 are the households that give from $5,000 to $10,000. And band 5 are the households that give from $10,000 and above during a time year period. So you can see that this particular chart has all of those bands and the households are giving, the dollars that are being given, the average of what those households are giving, if you take those metrics and you divide them out, the percentage of the household that it represents, and the percentage of the overall contributions that are being represented as well. And you can make some determinations. In this particular graph, you can see that we've labeled or we've overlaid year over year giving. So you can see immediately by your groups of giving and your groups of givers, are we up or down from where we were at this point last year? And is this top heavy, or are we kind of evenly spread out from amongst our giving? Do we have many people who are giving all with a good level, or are we being funded by a few? What you can see here by looking at this particular graph is that over here, 55% of the giving is coming from 30% of the givers. Whereas people who are giving $200 or less a year, that shows 2% of the givers are doing 0.11% of the giving. And you can look and see we're down with getting new givers in. We're down with being able to grow people who are down there in band 1. You were 60% down from where we were last year. So this is a really insightful chart and analysis tool. This analysis tool really can help to motivate you to say, how are we as leaders of our organization looking at the groups of givers and helping to build discipleship strategies that will encourage each of them where they're at, that will help each of them to understand that every gift matters, whether it's 2 pennies or $2 million, it's a matter of the heart. And it helps to encourage those who have much. Hey, and the Lord of those who have much, much is required. So we're able to look at this and say, where do we need to build in some extra measures, whether in a sermon series or communication strategy or educational resources, to be able to equip our givers to be able to grow the funding in a way that's very appealing to people so that they understand they're being faith raised, like I said earlier, and not fundraised. If we dive further at this particular chart, you're able to look and see just the individual look as well. So if you're using Mortarstone or you have Mortarstone, you can see this immediately. If you don't, good thing. We can get you a free demo of Mortarstone. You can have a free look at Mortarstone. We want you to be able to look at your information inside of Mortarstone so we can hook you up with that. But when you're looking at this information in the banded level of givers, you can look at it in that year over year comparison, and then you can kind of look at it as a standalone as well, so that you're able to make some more clear determinations of where you're headed as a church or a nonprofit. Here are some things to think about when you're looking at all of your givers in those ways. How many givers are down there in band 1, and how many givers do you have in band 5? And what would be some really good goals for you to set if you're going to be employing some discipleship strategies? So we've outlined here for you some giving percentage goals that you can try to achieve. Once you've looked at your own data, you can compare it to these giving goals and you can say, is this achievable for who we are? And how do we take one small step in trying to achieve these percentages within those band ranges? This is just an idea for you to be able to take the analytics and apply some strategy and goals to be able to see those things work together. And then I'm going to show you one last view here on all giving when it comes to total contributions, as far as saying, let's just do a year over year look. We also think that, that it is equally as important, just like analyzing those 3 years of history at the beginning, to do a year over year look at where you're at today versus last year, so that you can kind of take that projection and, if you need to, make a stronger year end appeal from now through the end of December to be able to encourage people to help finish strong through the year, so that the ministries that you are funding can not only be funded totally through the end of this year, but be really set up for your budget for 2023. So this is a year over year look, same thought process of what we did on those earlier reports that we were looking at. Then we can take and drill a tiny bit deeper. So this is a fun thing. We're still looking at everything from an all giver standpoint when it comes to analytics. And what we're wanting to do now is say, okay, now that we've kind of looked at the composition of where we're at and filled in some holes, and looked at the composition of what groups of givers we might need to target or put some discipleship strategies with education around, let's look deeper and say, how are we doing at retaining these givers that we have? This particular chart shows you very easily your raw retention of where you're at year over year. How many people gave both last year and are still giving this year, or how many people gave last year, but they have not given anything this year. So there's the top chart that shows you right there, where you can see that there were 757 that gave in both periods, that comprised of 65% retention. There are 400 households who had given the year before that have not made a gift yet. And here you can click, if you're inside of Mortarstone, you'll be able to click and drill down on that 406 households and see, who are those people? Did they leave because of something that we did? Did they move out of the area? Was there a death in the family? Was there some sort of pastoral care that needs to be taken care of? You can take those 406 people, households, and you can dive a bit deeper and try to understand what's really going on and reach out to them from a pastoral standpoint. And then you can do something with the other group. So if you're going to reach out to the 34% with some sort of pastoral care or thought process, the other 65% are where you want to break those people down and say, well, but of the retention, how well are we really doing with that group of people? And this is where you can say, we have people who are coming in strong, we have people who are lagging behind, and we have households that are falling short. And you could begin to implement a strategy based around those individual segments and say, what are we doing to communicate with these groups of people to encourage them through the end of the year and into 2023? We might encourage the people who are coming in strong very differently than we're going to encourage or look at the households who are falling short. Each of these particular segments of all of your giving and retention can be drilled down into, and you can build a communication strategy around. And we'd encourage you to take the opportunity to do that with your giving. Where we're headed with that is, if your retention, your overall retention, is less than 60%, you may really need to employ some strategies to retain that group of givers, because you're bleeding just a little bit, and we want to help you to stop that. We don't want to just put Band-Aids on, but we really want to help that to stop and to heal and to grow. So we always recommend that you look at that. We recommend you look at it no matter what. But when you're analyzing your data in comparison to what we're suggesting here, we think that it's relevant that if it's 60% or retention or lower, that you really begin to analyze your mission and your vision and say, are we communicating this well? Where are the gaps that are really falling short? Do we have a clear and compelling reason, case for support that people would want to give to and through our church or our nonprofit organization? This is really where you would also involve some of your other staff members, not necessarily at looking at the details, but you would involve them by asking them to be a part of helping to reach out to some of these people and understanding the ministries and the givers who are attached to them, and if you're really connecting those dots well. So let's move on and dive just a bit further. So far, we've been able to cover what's going on with all of your givers. We've really been able to look at the different segments of bands of givers. We've dove deep and looked at the retention of all of your giving. Now, with all of your giving, all of that context, there are 3 segments that we're going to take a look at. The first segment is new givers. Then we'll move on to core givers, and we'll finish out with top givers. When you are looking at your new givers in your organization, we know, just like anybody else, that we want to get new people coming in the door and helping to support the mission and vision of what we are all about. That is so important to the health of an overall church and to the health of an overall nonprofit organization. We need new people aware of what we are doing through our local church. We need those people to understand that vision that I was talking about, that case for support. And we need them to be able to consider how they can help and continue to be a part of taking Jesus to a lost and broken world. So when it comes to the area of our new givers, there are 3 things that we think are extremely important for you to measure and build strategies around. And what I have seen over my 12 years of experience in this field is that many, many people do one of these 3 things. And it's like a stool that's no longer even. If you're only doing one of these 3 things, you are off balance and you're missing out on an opportunity to connect with new givers. Here on the screen, you can see there are first-time givers, there are second-time givers, which are first-time givers who give again for the second time. And then there are the first-time givers who gave, and the third group represents, and they didn't give again. So they did not make a second gift within a specified period of time. In order to have a balanced 3-leg stool, you should be reaching out to all segments of these givers, and all of them should be a part of your new giver strategy. In each and every single one of these, you're able to measure and look in Mortarstone at a main dashboard immediately when you open up your account. You're able to see, are we up or down in acquiring new givers? If you're down, you need to build a strategy to try to encourage new givers to come in. Are we up or down in converting people who've given a first time to giving a second time gift? And then if not, then you need to work on building that strategy. Are we down in those who aren't giving a gift? Well, clearly, if you're down in one, you're most likely going to be down in the other. And that means that we need to have strategies to reach out to all of those segments. If you've got a first-time giver, we are going to recommend that you say, let's look back and let's track and let's look where we've been. Let's see what's going on with those givers to see how many we've retained over this last year. And if we don't have those 3 strategies in place, let's look at building out how that can work. If you do have some of those strategies in place, then let's see how well we did at the end of a year in retaining them and growing them from one band to the next. Your first-time givers should be thanked. They should be encouraged to give again or talked about to the organization. If they give another time, they should be connected with and assimilated into your culture of what it is that you're doing. And if they haven't given again, they should be connected with and encouraged to know a different story or an impact of a life change of what happened because they gave and what can happen if they continue to partner with your organization. This is a really big deal, and it helps them to get assimilated in your overall processes so that your funding can truly be generated with some new lifeblood and some new dollars of people who are growing in their level of giving. This is our slide right here that will help you to consider what you can do when it comes to employing those discipleship strategies around your first time givers. The next group that we're going to talk about that I mentioned is core givers. And I love core givers. I bet most of us fall into the category of core givers. And we can know that our organizations and our churches are funded and they are helped with and by these core people. These are the people who are coming in and they are serving on the weekend in the kids' ministries. They're holding doors open. They're serving cups of coffee. They're smiling at people. They're helping people to get seated. These are the people who are your altar ministry team or the people who are helping at your kids' camp or your events. These are the precious people that we have that are giving somewhere between $200 up to $10,000. And they're probably working really hard at all of the things that they're doing and trying to grow and understand what it means to be a Christ follower. These are people that you want to have an extra close eye on because these are the people that you can easily overlook. First time givers are always a big deal. We've got to reach out to our first time givers. It's just like when you're going to be signing up for a new service, right? A new cell phone service or a new internet service or a new cable service. First time givers always get that new little extra little push or excitement. And then those who are top givers, boy, they sometimes get some extra looks or appreciation or that. But this core group needs to be thanked equally as much. So when you're looking at this data, what I want you to do is wonder, are we acquiring new core givers and are we retaining them? This cohort graph that you can see here on your screen has on the left-hand side of your screen, July through July. So it's looking at 13 months worth of history. It's taking an initial starting point up in the upper left-hand corner, 252 givers moved into being core givers in July of 2019 in this example. And that very next month, that same core group of givers, those 252 givers, 160 of those 252 givers came back and gave something again that next month. That's a pretty big drop off. That's not a pretty big growth rate. And so that's why that next box 1 month out from the initial is in red. When you're looking at this inside of Mortarstone, this chart is in your core givers, your new givers, and your top givers, and you're able to analyze it by colors as well as by the data that you can read on the screen. So again, what you're trying to do with looking at this chart is say, how much are we really growing core givers from in a total standpoint, and what are the dollars that they're bringing in? So if you look at all of the left-hand side column, you can see that in 13 months, you had 5,173 givers move into the core giver category. And that group represented 2.9 million of the dollars that were brought in. And then how well are we doing at retaining them? How well are we doing at growing them? How well are we doing at helping them to move along in their journey? This graph is extremely important to helping you understand what's going on with these givers. Some ideas of what you can have whenever you are working with this group of givers is to really understand your retention rate, the dollar amounts, and if you have a low retention rate, you can reach out to these different segments and offer financial courses. We're going to look at some banded giving here in just a second, and we can talk about how to specialize in that. But this is where you start to use stewardship and generosity ministries as a whole to be able to really help educate and grow people in their biblical financial discipleship, whether they need a budget or they're ready to leave a legacy. This is where you can reach out to that core segment and offer some financial courses that will really help them in their own journey. And this is where you can really use your pastors and your staff to be able to say, hey, I need some help. I wondered if you knew these people or these people. Can you tell me if you've seen them lately here at church? How well are they involved in your ministry? Do you feel like they're pretty connected? And you can try to grow them from a perspective of knowing that relationally, somebody is connecting to that core giver, and that makes them a sticky core giver. Another way to analyze your core givers is something I said just a second ago. It's by looking at the bands. It's by saying, in and of those bands, specifically core givers are 2, 3, and 4, did people stay in the same band or did they grow? And if they're in a particular band, this is where I'm saying you can offer targeted financial courses targeting these people. So let me teach you how to read this chart real fast. When you're looking at this particular report, you can see one time period on one side of the screen and another time period at the top part of the screen. The prior year and the current year of where you are wanting to analyze. And you can look at one band and another. So let's just run our hands across band 3 to band 3 from one year to the next. You retain 1,674 people that were in band 3 last year that are also in band 3 this year. You can take that 1,674 people and you could send out an email or a text message or a postcard or a letter or a financial education course. You can start to really target that group of givers and encourage them with a story or with an opportunity to be able to learn something new in this area. You can drill into any of these particular bands if you're using Mortarstone and see who grew and who didn't. You can break it down into more spreadsheeted type of information and really begin to analyze, because some of these bands are quite large. Between $1,000 and $5,000, they may have grown in their level of giving, even if they didn't grow in a band of giving. And we want to be able to recognize that and know that we're doing a good job with our discipleship tools and the things that we're presenting through our ministries. So banded giving is a big deal. These are the questions that you really should ask yourself when you're looking at that. How well have we increased in our giving? How many of our givers decreased? And then click on each of those groups. Try to understand who the people are. Build a strategy around them to develop a relationship and encourage them in their next step. Finally, we're going to finish out our webinar with looking at the last subsegment underneath your all givers. That would be your top givers. And this is a group that we're going to recommend doing some extra special things with too. This is not a be all end all, but this is your group of givers who are giving $10,000 or more in a calendar year to the church. And that's a big deal. That's a really big opportunity to be able to say, are we stewarding this group of givers well? And are there ways that we can help this group of givers not only to give from cash, but to fully consider the other opportunities of giving from non-cash as well? Most of the time when we are talking about giving from an organization, we only think of it in the context of cash. But truth be told, 90% of what a household owns is typically not found in their income bucket or their immediate bank account. It's often found on their balance sheet and other things that they have, like stocks or businesses or real estate. These are all donor advised funds. These are all different tools that our givers can begin to think about giving from and can typically then receive a tax advantage and also help to do something to the organization that they love. This group of givers is really important to be able to help along in this part of the journey. The chart that you're looking at, the report that we're pulling, comes straight from Mortarstone's Church Health Report inside of your Mortarstone reporting tool. And this shows you easily last year versus this year, whether you're up or down, and you're giving in your givers. When you're thinking about top givers and you're thinking about their age segmentation or the orientation of which they're giving, we want to be able to make you aware, if you weren't aware, that there's a wealth transfer taking place right now from one generation to the next. Over the next decade to 2 decades, $69 trillion will be changing hands from one generation to the next. And it's estimated that 12 trillion of that will go to churches or nonprofit organizations. But we have to beg the question, could it be more? Is that it? That only 12 trillion would go? I'm not saying that's a small amount, but when we're looking at $69 trillion, And we know that our mission and our vision of what we're trying to accomplish is kingdom minded. Shouldn't we hope that we could take a bit more of that lion's share to fund the kingdom for future opportunities? I'm going to consider that you begin to analyze this group of givers. Pull your church health report. Look and see, are you getting the bulk majority of your budget funded from this group of givers? And if you are, then put a plan in place to start building creative gift planning opportunities. That means let's have a way to be able to talk to them about giving from that non-cash bucket, and maybe even to heavily consider giving to the church in their will or their trust. That is an opportunity for all of your givers to be able to consider. And then you can help each of those individuals to steward their resources well. Because if we don't, by de facto, the IRS is an heir, and we don't want that to happen. We want to be able to help the kingdom and the people who are going to receive the inheritance to be set up with education and opportunities to continue to see God's work advance. You can see that the very last point that I've given there is that without proper planning, 90% of givers who do think about setting up something at the end of their life won't even include a charitable component. So we think that when it comes to your top givers, you've probably got a pretty good idea of how to have a vision night or a dessert night or an appreciation event or a casting the future event. We think what we need to do and along with those things is not only to cast the vision, but to give them other creative tools to be able to use when they're thinking about giving to their church or to your nonprofit organization. So these are the different segments of what's going on when you're analyzing your data. These are some of the charts and reports that you can pull out of Mortarstone. These are some of the things that you can do. These are the things that we think are really important. To summarize everything that I've been able to share with you over the last few minutes, it is simply this. You must start with analyzing your data. You have to be able to know where you've been in order to know where you're going. Then you have to have a strategy in place to be able to reach those precious men and women who are attached to the data and faith raise them, not fundraise them. And then finally, you need to be able to manage to that. Inspect what you expect so that those contributions are actually growing the way that you anticipated them to through the end of 2022 and into 2023. As a free little look, our shout out to you, we would love to be able to help you analyze your data. So if you are interested in analyzing your data, please let's talk. You see my email down there at the bottom. You can go to mortarstone.com. Tammy, I'm sure, and Amanda will hook you up with information when this is over. We want to give you this look because you've just sat through this. So now we want you to go compare your data to what we just taught you. And then second of all, if you need an end of the year giving strategy and you have not done that yet, we want to help you to build your end of the year strategy. So feel free to reach out to me and I will help give you some components of what a successful end of the year strategy can look like for you and your church. And that, my friends, is it. I have enjoyed being with you.
Well, Megan, that was wonderful. I actually want to kind of fill in the loop, circle it back around. I want to show one thing since we have a couple minutes. I want to show you what I was able to do. No, this isn't it. Sorry. Let me go to the right.
Stop sharing my screen too.
Okay. So share my screen. I need to go. Let's see over here. Right here. Give me 1 second. It's this one here. I had it all ready too. I'm so excited to show. Okay, here we go. Here we go. All right. What's really exciting for me is that all of that data that you gave us, I've been using to build what I am giving my assumptions for giving. So everything that you described in regards to looking back at the trends for the last 3 years, you at the very end, you talked about those core givers and those that maintained the 1600, but look at the ones that lapsed. Look at that over a, maybe a 4-year period and come up with what your average retainage is of the core, because that's so critical in projecting what you believe your giving is going to be. So there's the component of, like you say, not fundraising, but faith raising. But in all of that, you create what the demographics of your giving is going to be, which in turn allows you to create what you believe the dollars are going to be for ministry. Because everything, the contribution is the lifeblood of being able to do ministry. So then each of the ministry managers will have an opportunity to create the ministry they need based on what we believe we're going to receive in contributions. So real quick, I just want to show you, this is an example of a worksheet that I literally took the bands and I created assumptions for each of my bands by gift count and by average for the 1,000 and what the total gifts would be in band 1. Same with band 2, band 3, band 4. And then I came up with exactly what my total giving would be in the bands. Then I created what I believed would be my new gifts in band 1, band 2, band 3, and band 4. I predicted based on trends where things were going to move between bands, what my lapse gifts were going to be, how my average percentage of my gifts was going to change, and then my gift counts. And all of that, I'm going to just keep scrolling down until I was able to get my total giving for the year based on this band movement, new givers, lapsed donors, and percentage of average gift. So instead of doing it in Excel, I was able to do it in this worksheet in Martis, which then converts to my total giving. So when someone asks me, in this month, why is our giving different? I can literally go into Mortarstone and see what happened in comparison to what I projected based on that same metric. So again, you're doing it from the stewardship perspective of knowing where they are to grow them in their faith, but it's also allowing us to know what our limitations may or may not be in order to perform ministry based on those contributions. So I just wanted to quickly show you that all of this information is educational for stewardship, but it's also educational for projecting what you believe so that you can project ministry in a way that is explainable, defendable. You can actually go to the boards and the elders and be able to eloquently state why you are where you are.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think we had some questions or things come in, but I think Nikki, who works with Mortarstone Marketing, she's going to make sure that we get this this webinar, the recording of the webinar, out to everyone. And we definitely want you to follow up with questions on how we can help you better manage the contributions and be able to use these software tools to help you do that as well. So if there's nothing else, I think we're just going to say goodbye and thank you so much for attending today.